All right, so it says the graph below is that of a cubic polynomial c of x. Use the information from the graph to write a possible rule for c of x. Express the rule in equivalent factored and standard polynomial forms. So it's asking me to write a possible rule. So if you don't understand what that means, it wants you to write something similar to this, ax squared plus bx plus c. When we say rule, that's really what it's talking about. So where to start here? Well, I'm going to start with the zeros, the x-intercepts. So I see my x-intercept at -2. I see another x-intercept at 0. And my third x-intercept at 3. So that tells me that I have an x at -2, an x at 0, and an x at 3. And that might not seem like it tells us a lot, but if you remember when we have zeros, if I go back to the previous one, when we have zeros, it's just going to be what's the opposite of inside the binomial, as long as the coefficient on x is 1. So here we can assume, it says possible rule, so this might not be the exact rule, so keep that in mind. So we're going to assume here that the coefficient on x is 1. And if that's the case and it's just the opposite when we put it in, this means that this came from x plus 2. And x equals 3 means that came from x minus 3. And x equals 0 means it came from x. So a possible rule for c of x, well, maybe I should group that first. A possible rule for c of x in factored form would be x times x plus 2 times x minus 3. And again, look at that. I got that directly from the graph. 3, 0, -2. And clearly, 0 doesn't have an opposite. So 0 is the, midway point between the negative and positive numbers. So it just stays 0. But it's also asking me for it in standard form. So I have to actually get it to look something like this up here. Ax squared plus bx plus c. So that's the same thing that we did in the last video. We're going to multiply x plus 2 times x minus 3, and then distribute in our x. So when I multiply x plus 2 times x minus 3, I get x squared. I get x times x minus 3 plus 2 times x minus 3. And if you want to do this in box method, you are more than welcome to. So now I have x squared minus 3x plus 2x minus 6. I see that I have negative 3x and positive 2x. Because they both have x's, that means they're like terms. So I combine those like terms and I get x squared minus x minus 6. But remember, I only did the underlined portion, so now this x needs to come down and be distributed in. So now I get x cubed minus x squared minus 6x. And that is another possible, I shouldn't say another, and that is another form of the possible rule that we created for c of x. So again, just real quick, I looked at the graph, I saw where the x-intercepts were, and I recognized that the x-intercepts are also my zeros. So since they were my zeros, I knew I had -2, 0, and 3. And I said, okay, well, let's just put them back into the binomial, but they're going to be opposite when I put them back in the binomial. So that's why I have x minus 3 and x plus 2. X equals 0 is just going to stay x, because when you set x equal to 0, it's 0. So then in order to change it from factored form, which I have here first, into standard form, I just need to multiply it out. But in order to multiply it out, I have to start with the two binomials first, multiply that out, get an answer, and then multiply in the binomial. So that way there's no mess ups or confusion. All right, so go back through this and try to do practice problem for number 3.